Happy Independence Day, Sooner Nation. Welcome back to the Sooner Surge. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed to our YouTube channel. Keep liking and commenting. We really appreciate it. Also, make sure you check out the Fan Stop at fanstop.com. Football season is right around the corner. It's July 4th. You have the SEC Media Days coming up July 15th through 18th. Thought it'd be a good discussion to talk about four things that we think here at the Sooner Surge needs to happen for this Sooner team to make the playoff this year. And we'll start with this first one, guys. One thing that needs to happen for OU to make the playoff is this defense needs to allow 21 points or less on average throughout the season.
Yeah, last year it was 23.46. That's good for 46 in the country. In 2023 for Oklahoma. And really the defense was pretty dang good, other than a few miscue games. You had the Kansas 38 points allowed, but even then the defense got the stops that they needed to win that game. And then just kind of the debacle in the second half against TCU is really what drove that number up. But you look at the schedule for Oklahoma. If Oklahoma defensively, with what they are returning, and Danny Stutzman, Billy Bowman, Dejon Terry, adding in Dominic Williams, you also have hopefully a healthy Gentry Williams, Woody Washington. That's almost the entire defense there. There's still a few other names, Ethan Downs, a senior. There's so much talent defensively that if Oklahoma could allow 21 points or less, you have to imagine they're going to win almost every game. 21 or less, I don't think there's a way very often in which the offense isn't scoring at least 22 points.
Yeah, Hunter, you said it. Oklahoma, they're returning a ton of guys, a ton of playmakers on this defense. This is a defense now going into year 3 under Brent Venables. The expectation is high, right? You saw the jump from year 1 to year 2. It was a pretty massive jump. In year 2 to year 3, you're expecting another huge jump from Oklahoma. Last year, they did really make stops and plays when they needed it most. For example, they got a stop in the Red River Shootout against Texas on the 1-yard line. They stopped them for 4 plays. So this is an Oklahoma defense that has a chance this year to take their game even to another level. There's plenty of NFL guys on this defense, dudes that we'll be seeing playing on Sunday. So really, next year, there is no excuses for this Oklahoma defense to not be one of the better defenses in the SEC.
Yeah, and you guys both hit the nail on the head. You wouldn't be thinking this unless they had what they have returning. Across the board, they also made some changes in coaching. And when you're looking at 2 to 3 points a game on average, you go down from 23 to 21. It seems small. It's pretty significant, actually, in the grand scheme of things. So, yeah, that's the first one. I think they're capable of doing it. Competition-wise, it's going to be tougher, the conference they're in. But OU should be improved and make that next step. Switching gears a little, another area where OU needs to show some improvement, and this lies really at the top, guys, and it's with the coaching staff with some game management. They've struggled that. Obviously, you bring in Zach Alley. Ted Roof is gone. It should allow Brent Venables the opportunity to be more of that CEO role, that head coach role, and try to maybe make better decisions, or at least more crucial decisions at the right time. So game management, you also add Seth Luttrell. Last year, guys, there were some struggles and some play calling in big situations. So I think game management is one of the key, how much they run the clock, things like that, guys.
Yeah, you mentioned 2 of the new hires for Oklahoma at the coordinator positions, and Seth Luttrell for the offense, Zach Alley for the defense. Alley has, really been Brent Venables his entire life in his coaching career. He started at Clemson as a student assistant, worked his way up to eventually defensive coordinator at Jacksonville State, had very good seasons there. And again, coming to Oklahoma to run Brent Venables' defense and kind of allowing Brent to step away to where it's not as much. You saw it at times last year. It was almost like he was calling the plays because of how involved he had to be on the field. And that allowed some things to slip away. I think one thing to note for Oklahoma in 2022, they were 0-5 in one-possession games. 2023, that number went to 3-2. So improved, but you're still 3-7 in one-possession games. And A lot of that comes down to, at times, coaching, timeouts in particular. It still didn't really improve last year. Sometimes it seemed to get a little bit better, but there was also some questionable timeouts being made. You're not using them in the first half. Well, sometimes you need to give your defense a break, to kind of slow it down on offense or whatever the situation may be. But defensively, especially, I think there was times that Oklahoma used a timeout last year. They probably get a stop and points aren't going up on the board, but they're not. And then the issue with it is it comes to the third quarter. You only have 3 timeouts and you're burning 2 early on. So you have 1 for the remainder of the game, the most important portion of the game when the 4s are up. That's something that Brent Venables has to improve on. And for Oklahoma to make the playoffs, it's really going to happen in 2024.
Yeah. Hunter, you said the same thing I was going to say with the timeouts. Just, it's like, why at certain times did Brent Venables not use timeouts last year when they were needed? And sometimes he would use them whenever you would rather take that delay game to save it for later in the game. And so it's really just seeing how Brent Venables going into his third year, how we're going to see him develop with the game management skills, using his timeouts, how maybe even plays are called, and him having Seth Luttrell now as offensive coordinator, who was a previous head coach, is super key, because Jeff Lebby too, last year at times, we would see him tend to make the offense go too fast at times when it wasn't needed. So now having Seth Luttrell, who was a previous head coach, now really Brent Venables not having to worry so much about the offense and like, should I use the timeout here for the offense? Should I not? Due to the fact that Seth Luttrell has that experience.
Yeah, and again, they've made the necessary changes in the offseason to improve in this area. I think Brent Venables knew that that's something that needed to change, and he made the change. So you should make that improvement. Third thing that we think that OU needs to do, and this is probably cliche, okay? It's very cliche, but OU improved on getting turnovers. Obviously, Alex Grinch's end of his time at OU just could not get turnovers. Last year, a lot better at getting turnovers. They need to win the turnover margin. You also have a young quarterback, so you got to think about there could be more turnovers on the offensive side. But for OU to make the playoff, they have to own the turnover battle.
Yeah, last year Oklahoma had a positive turnover margin. They had 26 forced turnovers, 20 turnovers offensively, and 6 of those came in the bowl game for the offensive turnovers. So before that, it was a pretty wide margin there. Oklahoma did a lot better at that, even in the games that they lost. You think of the Ethan Downs interception. That pretty much sealed the game right there. The offense wasn't able to get the job done on the other end. And then against Oklahoma State, Billy Bowman, massive interception with a really big return as well, kind of giving the offense the momentum that they need. They're not able to reciprocate and put points up on the scoreboard at that point in time. Jackson mentioned it earlier against Texas. But if you remember, second play of the game, Gentry Williams picked off Quinn Ewers. You had the Peyton Bowen forced fumble against Quinn Ewers as well. Another interception in there from Kendall Dolby, Billy Bowman. It happened a lot last year, and I think it's going to happen a lot. The question, though, a redshirt freshman quarterback, Jackson Arnold, his first full year of starting, kind of showed some turnover issues in the bowl game. He has to improve it. I don't think that that's an issue that we're going to see a lot, but right now in July, it could be. We haven't seen this 2024 team for Oklahoma just yet. Jackson Arnold had 4 turnovers in that game. The entire offense had 6. You can't do that and try to make a playoff.
Jeremy and Hunter, you guys have both said it. Jackson Arnold, he's young, he's inexperienced. He probably more than likely is going to have some turnover issues, maybe in certain games, due to the fact that he's playing high-level defenses week in and week out in the SEC. And it seems like now for years, it's like we've been saying, well, you know, the offense are scoring with the defense. They can't force a turnover or get a stop when it's needed. Then it's, oh, well, the defense is making plays, but the offense is not responding to what the defense is doing. So now with Oklahoma going into the SEC, they really need to figure out that balance of if the defense is going to force this big interception, the offense needs to execute, get points on the board, have maybe even a successful long drive to chew clock when it's needed most in order for Oklahoma to be successful with the turnover margin.
Yeah, and that leads us to the last thing, guys. The fourth thing that this team needs to do to make the playoff, and this is probably, not probably, no way around it. This is the biggest question mark, I think, for this team because we don't know who it's going to be yet, and that's special teams. Obviously, punting got a lot better. Kick coverage was pretty good last year. The return game needs to be better across the board. I think punt and kickoff return. But obviously the black eye last year was the inability to make pressure kicks, to make consistent field goals, and you're giving 3 points away several times last year. And you talked about it earlier, Hunter. When you're losing close games, special teams really stand out. And OU's got to be much better in the special teams category, guys, if they're going to make the playoff.
Yeah, it's an absolute. They have to improve in the special teams area. If they do not, Oklahoma has pretty much no chance of making the playoffs. We mentioned it earlier, game management. There's going to be close games in the SEC. There's going to be games to where that one special teams play could be pinpointed in a win or in a loss, whether that be a kick, punt return. Last year, that was kind of an issue with fumbles and even kickoff returns at times. Joel Farouk dropped a couple after a big return against Tulsa. Again, it didn't matter with Oklahoma ran away with that one, but it can matter in the SEC, those types of plays. And you mentioned it. Zach Schmidt last year was not good. It was a very bad year for him. It was at times where it seemed like there was no confidence in him. And now Oklahoma brought in Tyler Keltner from FSU, experienced kicker that in a previous stop that made a lot of field goals at a lower level. You also have Liam Evans, a local kid. So there's some competition in that room, that kicking room, that if Zach Schmidt is the kicker that trots out against Temple and earns that starting job, you would have to imagine that he earned it at that point with the competition that he has around him. And then the punt game as well. Brent's talked about it before on kind of at times how important it is to get extra yardage. And then last year when it was almost just catch the ball, that was the biggest deal with Gavin Friedman at times. So what the approach is going to be in the return game is going to be something to note. Is Oklahoma going to try to maybe throw somebody like Peyton Bowen out there? Billy Bowman returned kicks before, but then the injuries happened there. Are they going to try to put one of their best players out there to kind of maximize their value, or are they just going to kind of just get the ball? He's talked about it, a game of inches. So 7 yards, I think he said at one point, matters a lot. And I think that's also going to matter this year in the SEC.
Yeah. Jeremy and Hunter, you guys have both said it. There's a lot of questions about special teams going into this year. Is Zach Schmidt going to start at kicker? Is it going to be Tyler Keltner or Liam Evans? We don't really know there. We won't know until game one, obviously. But I do look for Oklahoma also to produce more touchdowns on special teams because last year, if I remember correctly off the top of my head, Gavin Freeman scored the only touchdown, correct, on special teams. That was the first game of the year versus Arkansas State on a punt return touchdown.
Yeah. Bryce Ford could have recovered a blocked punt.
Yeah.
It happened. They got
then a roll out of the back of the end zone. And then so I really just look for Oklahoma to produce more touchdowns there on special teams. And Hunter, you brought up a great point. Could they potentially put Peyton Bowen back there to return punts? Obviously, he was one of the best in the country while doing it in high school at Denton Guyer. So he has that experience there. And then you just talk about Oklahoma. They have other guys like Brennan Thompson, Jaleel Farouk, who even has experience back there. So it's like Oklahoma special teams wise, they need to produce touchdowns because in big games, if they get a kick return for a touchdown, that could be the difference potentially in a huge game. And also that could maybe even be the difference in whether or not they potentially even make the college football playoff, just because they're able to produce several scores in close games on special teams that help them so much.
And the Sooners have also made an improvement in that area because they brought in a special teams coach that was one of the best. So I think, all these areas, guys, they've done what they needed to do. Now it's time. It's getting closer. It's time to see if all these things can happen. Viewers, drop your comments and suggestions on what does this team need to happen need to have happen for them to make the playoff. Hit the subscribe button. Appreciate you watching. Till next time.